Welcome back, Wainsider family, to a channel that lives and breathes the emotional undercurrents of every rivalry, every glance, and every word spoken behind the curtain. Tonight, we're pulling back the veil on a confrontation that was years in the making, a clash of eras that erupted backstage on Monday Night Raw, proving that some tensions can only be contained for so long before they explode. This isn't just about a moment, it's about the collision of two distinct legacies, two powerful wills, and the immense pressure that comes with defining a generation. To understand the gravity of the standoff between Nikki Bella and Asuka, we must first journey back to a time when the Divas Championship was the pinnacle, and the Bella Twins were the undeniable center of that universe. Nikki Bella's record-setting reign wasn't just about championship gold, it was about power, influence, and embodying a specific brand of mainstream celebrity that brought unprecedented eyes to the women's division. She was a pioneer of a certain kind of stardom, operating in an era where perception was often as important as in-ring prowess, and she mastered that game completely. Then, a storm arrived from Japan, and her name was Asuka. She was the antithesis of everything the so-called Divas era represented. The Empress of Tomorrow's power wasn't in her reality show presence or her catchphrases, it was in her undeniable, terrifying in-ring mastery. Her undefeated streak wasn't a storyline device, it felt like a legitimate force of nature, a stark contrast to the more scripted, personality-driven narratives of the past. She was pure, unadulterated combat, and she demanded respect through violence and victory alone. Please like, share and subscribe for more WWE content. For years, these two icons existed on parallel tracks, representatives of two different evolutions of the same women's revolution. There was a silent, unspoken tension between these philosophies, the old guard who built the platform and the new wave who redefined what was possible on it. Nikki, upon her return, had to adapt, to prove she could hang in this new, more athletic landscape, a pressure she openly embraced but one that undoubtedly came with its own private resentments and insecurities. Asuka, for her part, has always carried herself with the quiet confidence of a master. She watched the pageantry, the entrances, the drama, from a place of serene, knowing superiority. She knew her art was different. There had to be a quiet resentment for those who were celebrated for fame as much as for fight, a feeling that her brand of excellence was somehow purer, even if it was never said aloud. The smile often hid a simmering intensity that questioned the very foundations of stardom. This underlying Cold War had flickers of life before, a tense confrontation years prior, a few choice words in passing. But it was always kept professional, a mutual understanding that they operated in different spheres. Nikki's journey into motherhood and away from the ring, and Asuka's continued dominance, seemed to put the conflict to rest. It became history, a what-if scenario for fans to debate, a potential dream match that had seemingly passed its expiration date. The environment of WrestlePalooza, a celebration of the past and present, became the perfect pressure cooker. It was a night designed for nostalgia and fun, but it also forced these two worlds to collide in a confined space. The ghosts of past definitions of success were literally walking the halls, bumping into the current standard bearers. The air was thick with unspoken comparisons and the weight of legacy, a powder keg waiting for a single spark. That spark was a seemingly innocuous backstage interaction. A comment, perhaps about the nature of the event itself, or a perceived slight regarding a past encounter. It wasn't about the words themselves, but the tone, the history they carried. It was the condescension of a pioneer feeling her contributions were being overshadowed, met with the dismissive confidence of a true artist who believes her work speaks for itself. The politeness evaporated in an instant. The verbal exchange was sharp, a rapid-fire volley of pent-up frustrations translated into two different languages but understood perfectly in the universal tongue of resentment. Nikki's voice, usually laced with a practiced media charm, turned hard and defensive. Asuka's responses, often playful, became short, pointed, and dripping with a venomous disdain. The masks were off, and the real issue was laid bare, a fundamental disagreement over what truly constitutes a legend. Then, it happened. A finger pointed, and personal line crossed. Asuka's hand shot up, not to strike, but to dismiss, to wave away everything Nikki represented. It was the ultimate sign of disrespect. In that moment, Nikki saw red. The years of adapting, of proving herself all over again, of being compared and contrasted, culminated in a single, blinding flash of rage. She shoved Asuka back, a physical manifestation of years of built-up pressure. The Empress did not stagger. She simply stopped. The smile that so often confounds her opponents vanished, replaced by a chilling, placid stare. The transition from offended artist to vengeful warrior was instantaneous. This was no longer an argument, it was a challenge that had been accepted. The attack was not a wild brawl, it was calculated, brutal efficiency. A single, devastating kick to the midsection doubled Nikki over before she could even register the movement. Asuka stood over the fallen Bella, not with triumphant fury, but with a cold, analytical satisfaction. She had made her point, not with words, but with action. She had demonstrated the hierarchy of their respective arts in the most primal way possible. She didn't need to cut a promo, the result of the conflict was the only statement required. She adjusted her glove, her expression returning to its default state of serene mystery, and walked away, leaving the past literally and figuratively crumpled on the floor. The aftermath was a vacuum of sound in the hallway. Producers and crew who had witnessed the event stood frozen, not in fear of a fight, but in awe of its symbolic significance. This was more than a backstage scrap. It was a paradigm shift, a violent passing of the torch that nobody saw coming. The whispers began immediately, not about discipline, but about meaning. "Did you see that?" was followed by, "What does this mean?" The real backstage whisper is that this was a moment of undeniable reality bleeding into the storyline. The respect between the two is professional, but the clash of ideologies is very real. There's talk that this wasn't just a segment, but a genuine release of years of tension between two different schools of thought. It was a statement that the past, while respected, cannot stand in the way of the present if it refuses to acknowledge the evolution that has occurred. For Nikki Bella, this is a devastating blow to a legacy she has worked tirelessly to protect and evolve. It's a stark reminder that no amount of mainstream fame can inoculate you from the brutal honesty of the ring, or the backstage area that feeds it. For Asuka, it is a brutal reaffirmation of her philosophy. Her way, the way of pure, unadulterated skill, is the true and ultimate power. Everything else is just noise. This clash reverberates beyond them. It speaks to every veteran who has had to adapt and every new star who feels they must dismantle what came before to build something new. It's about the silent resentment between generations, the pressure to honor history while simultaneously surpassing it.